When I collapsed in my own kitchen, it wasn't the pain that frightened me. It wasn't the weight in my chest, the searing burn down my left arm, or the sudden darkness curling at the edges of my vision. It was the sound of her footsteps. Deliberate. Measured. Too calm. She walked right past me, not a gasp, not a scream, not a hand reaching down. Just a pause, and then the unmistakable click of the front door locking. I couldn't move. But I heard her. I heard her. Her voice drifted back through the keyhole. Soft. Sweet. Like it was just another Tuesday morning. Finally, Mary, the house is ours. What Claire didn't know. My security cameras were rolling. And my neighbor, Mrs. Ramirez, she had a spare key. Before we go any further, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I read every single one. Because this story isn't just about me. It's about anyone who's ever trusted the wrong people under their roof. And maybe, just maybe, it'll save someone else from what I barely escaped. My name is Mary Thompson, and I used to believe betrayal came with warning signs. I was a pediatric nurse for 41 years. I buried my husband 6 years ago and never thought I'd outlive the pain of that loss. I raised my son, Jason, with everything I had, no nanny, no shortcuts. I hosted every birthday, every holiday. This house in Charleston, South Carolina, it's not just a building to me. It's where I made a life. Where I held my husband's hand through chemo. Where Jason took his first steps. Where I learned how to be strong, even when it meant standing alone. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what came next. This isn't just a story about inheritance. This is a story about intent, about the kind of evil that smiles at you over breakfast. About what happens when love turns into leverage. 6 months ago, if you had told me my own son would stand by and let me die on a kitchen floor, I would have laughed. I would have said, Jason? Never. He's just a little lost right now. But I wasn't laughing the day he and Claire arrived with a U-Haul and a stroller. They said it would be temporary. Just a few weeks until Claire got her hours back at the salon, until Jason found a new tech job. He'd been laid off, they said. I didn't ask for paperwork. I didn't ask for timelines. I just moved my sewing machine to the attic, turned my quiet guest room into a toddler's playroom, and started cooking dinner for 5 instead of 1. Because that's what mothers do. We bend. We stretch. We adjust. Even when the walls start closing in. At first, it felt almost comforting. The sound of a child laughing in the hallway again. The chatter at the dinner table. The smell of Claire's shampoo in the upstairs bathroom. I thought maybe this house, which had felt so still since Charles died, was waking back up. But life has a way of whispering warnings. And I ignored every single one. Claire started small. She left dishes in the sink. Not a few, but a mountain. Jason snapped at me one morning when I reminded him of his job search. Oh my God, Mom, can you not? The boy who used to bring me flowers on Mother's Day now rolled his eyes when I asked if he'd taken the trash out. Then came the credit card bills. Takeout charges from apps I didn't use. Amazon orders I hadn't made. Streaming subscriptions I'd never heard of. Did you order something called Shadowcraft Legends? I asked Jason, holding the bill. He didn't even look up. That's mine. I'll pay you back. He never did. Claire, meanwhile, stopped going to work entirely. Said she needed to focus on homeschooling the baby, who was barely out of diapers. She wore my clothes. Used my perfume. Rearranged the pantry like it was her house. And the worst part? She started referring to it that way. When we repaint the kitchen. When we refinish the floors. Not once did she ask. She just assumed. It wasn't a request anymore. It was a rehearsal. I told myself I was overthinking. That I was just adjusting to the noise and the mess and the chaos of a full house again. But one night, I heard Claire on the phone, whispering in the guest room when she thought I was asleep. Yeah, I checked. Property's worth at least $800,000 now. In that neighborhood? It's a gold mine. She laughed. Once things are official, we'll list it. Jason's already talking to an agent. Official? List what? I felt my stomach knot. That house wasn't just wood and drywall. It was my life. My memories. My husband's hands in every beam. And suddenly, it felt like it was already being sold out from under me. I wanted to believe the best. That I was imagining it. That my son and daughter-in-law were struggling, not scheming. That the people I loved couldn't possibly be planning my exit while living under my roof. But I didn't know how wrong I was. Not yet. That part was still coming. The first real red flag came on a Tuesday morning. The kind of slow, quiet morning where the air in Charleston hangs heavy with humidity and memory. I had just come in from pruning the rose bushes. My coffee sat half-finished on the back porch table. And when I walked inside, into my own kitchen, there she was. Claire. Sitting at my table. Feet up, one of my mugs in her hand. And a stack of opened envelopes in front of her. My mail. She wasn't even trying to be subtle. She flipped through my bank statements like she was sorting coupons. Like my financial life, my decades of sacrifice, savings, and carefully paid bills, belonged to her now. What are you doing? I asked, not raising my voice. I wasn't angry yet. I was stunned. Claire didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She didn't even look embarrassed. She looked up and said, with that casual calm she always wore when she knew Jason would back her, "Jason and I are just worried about you." Worried, I repeated. She nodded. You've been forgetful lately. Remember the milk? You left it in the cabinet last week instead of the fridge. That never happened. But before I could correct her, Jason chimed in from the couch in the next room. Right on cue. She almost burned the rice the other day, too. It's just, we want to make sure you're okay. I stood there in my own kitchen, my name on every one of those bills, and felt like a trespasser. I'm 74, not 104, I said quietly. Claire gave a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. We just think maybe, you should consider your options. And there it was. The phrase. Your options. Jason walked in now, hands in his hoodie pockets like he was nervous but trying to appear calm. I've been researching a few places, he said. Assisted living, Claire clarified, like it was a spa retreat. They have beautiful facilities near Mount Pleasant. Gardens. On-site nurses. Bingo nights. I blinked. I still drove myself to church every Sunday, volunteered at the community pantry twice a week. Taught chess to kids at the library. But somehow, in the eyes of my son and his wife, I was now just elderly inventory. A fragile old woman in the way of their upward mobility. I swallowed. You want to put me in a home? Jason sighed, frustrated now. No one's putting you anywhere. We're just saying it might be time to downsize. You know, for your safety. Safety. They kept using that word like a crowbar. To pry open the future they wanted. To leverage my love against my independence. That night, I barely touched my dinner. Jason and Claire laughed at something on their phones while I picked at overcooked lasagna I hadn't made. Claire had started cooking. Not out of kindness, but to prove she was already in charge. And Jason? He couldn't even meet my eyes. I wanted to believe it was stress. That they were overwhelmed. That parenting had exhausted them and they were lashing out. But the truth was uglier. They weren't asking me to move out. They were laying the groundwork to take over. Bit by bit, they were nudging me out of my own life. Paperwork here, planted concern there. Testing the waters, seeing how much they could get away with. They were building a case. One lie at a time. Later that week, I caught Claire going through my medicine cabinet. She claimed she was looking for Tylenol. But the Tylenol was on the kitchen counter. I'd left it there after breakfast. That night, I started locking my bedroom door. And for the first time in my entire life, I began to wonder if the people under my roof were capable of hurting me. Not just emotionally, but really hurting me. You always think you'll know when someone's turning on you. You imagine there'll be shouting, confrontation, some terrible moment that makes everything clear. But the truth is, betrayal whispers. It creeps. And it often hides behind the most familiar faces. It started subtly. Claire began narrating my behavior. Little things. Almost like she was keeping notes out loud. Mary forgot to turn the oven off again, she'd say while washing dishes. Or, she couldn't remember the word for broom today. Scared me a little. Always within earshot. Always with just enough concern in her voice to sound maternal. Except I hadn't forgotten the oven, and I knew exactly what a broom was. It was gaslighting. Strategic. Rehearsed. Designed to make me question my memory, and my sanity. One afternoon, I walked into the living room to find Claire on my iPad. She was scrolling through a senior care website. Pictures of smiling nurses, pastel-colored hallways, and headlines like "Our residents feel safe again." Just doing some research, she said with a smile, barely looking up. God forbid something ever happens to you, we want to be prepared. She placed heavy emphasis on something happens. Jason sat beside her, quiet. He didn't defend me. He didn't disagree. He just stared at his phone while his wife Googled nursing homes, in my house, using my iPad, drinking from my cup. That night, I dreamt I was drowning, and Jason just stood there on the dock, watching. 2 days later, I opened my laptop and noticed new bookmarks I hadn't made. Power of attorney template, legal Zoom. How to gain conservatorship over a parent. Signs of early dementia in elderly relatives. I felt like someone had broken into my brain. Not to rob me, but to rearrange the furniture inside it. That night, I called my sister Denise in San Diego. I told her everything, the mail, the medicine cabinet, the nursing home websites. I even told her about the milk in the cabinet lie. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something I haven't been able to forget. "Mary, remember what happened to Uncle Frank?" I did. Too well. His son had started planting stories about him forgetting things, too. Said he was a danger to himself. Got a court order for guardianship. By the time Frank realized what had happened, he was living in a facility 3 towns over, cut off from his friends, his phone privileges limited, his house sold. By his own son. Denise's voice trembled when she spoke next. Don't underestimate what desperate people will do for money. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the den, alone, staring at the family photos on the wall. Jason's kindergarten graduation, Claire holding their baby on Christmas morning. All those smiles. All those years. How did we get here? I remembered something Charles once said before he passed, a good heart can't afford to be naive. I think he knew I'd struggle with this part. Seeing the worst in the people I loved. But that night, something shifted in me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I got quiet. Focused. Because if they were planning to take everything, they were going to find out I had more fight left in me than they ever expected. I opened a locked drawer in my home office and pulled out my will. Then I reached for my phone and called the one person I hadn't spoken to since Charles's funeral, Robert Morrison, our family attorney. "Mary," he said, surprised. "It's been a long time." "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "But I need to see you. Immediately. And I need to keep it quiet." I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't scream at them to get out. I didn't even change the locks, not yet. Because this wasn't the kind of battle I could win with noise. This required silence. And strategy. I met with Robert Morrison 3 days after that call. We sat in a quiet corner of a law office just outside Charleston, a place Claire and Jason would never think to check. He hadn't changed much. Same warm smile, same thin-rimmed glasses. He'd handled Charles's estate after the funeral. And he still remembered the way Charles used to call me Marigold when he thought no one was listening. "Mary," Robert said after I told him everything, "this isn't just about power of attorney. This is about control and greed. You need to protect yourself. Quietly. Thoroughly. And now." He slid a notepad across the desk. "Start documenting everything. And don't let them know you're onto them. Desperate people get unpredictable." So that night, I began my quiet rebellion. While Jason and Claire watched Netflix downstairs, I pulled out an old journal from the back of my closet and began writing. July 2nd, Claire suggested I forgot how to use the remote. I didn't. July 5th, $172 Amazon charge on my card. Not mine. July 7th, Claire asked if I remembered where my wedding ring was. It was in my safe, where I left it. July 8th, Jason asked what day it was. I said it was Thursday. It was. He looked disappointed. The next day, I visited my bank under the pretense of updating my mailing address. In reality, I opened a brand new checking and savings account in my name only. Moved the majority of my funds there. Updated my online passwords. Set up transaction alerts to my personal email, the one Jason didn't know about. I didn't want to believe they would steal from me. But I wasn't going to give them the chance. Then came the cameras. I told Claire I wanted to upgrade the smoke detectors, something about an article I'd read on senior fire safety. She didn't question it. While she took the baby out for a walk, I installed tiny, motion-triggered cameras, 2 in the kitchen, 1 in the living room, 1 facing the front hallway. They were disguised as air fresheners. Inconspicuous. Silent witnesses. They wouldn't stop anything from happening. But they'd see. The final step? I updated my will. With Robert's help, I had a new one drawn up, one that revoked Jason's financial control completely. Instead, I appointed Robert himself as executor. And gave power of attorney to someone far more trustworthy, my niece Ava, who lived in Atlanta. Ava had always called on my birthday. Sent cards. Visited after Charles passed. She didn't want my house. She wanted me. I hid the new documents in a locked compartment inside an old knitting basket Claire had dismissed as junk. If she searched my desk, let her find the decoy will. Let her believe she'd already won. And then, like nothing had changed, I cooked dinner. I smiled. I asked Jason how his job search was going. I complimented Claire's lemon bars, even though they tasted like salt. Because the game had begun, and I was going to let them show me exactly how far they were willing to go. But what I didn't know, what none of my cameras or documents could prepare me for, was how close they were to putting their plan into motion. The poisoning hadn't started with words. It had already started in my food. It was a Friday. Hot and sticky even before sunrise, the kind of Charleston heat that makes your bones feel damp. I woke up with a metallic taste in my mouth. My tongue felt coated. My stomach churned. And my chest, tight. Not painful, not yet. Just, off. At first, I chalked it up to stress, the hidden cameras, the journal entries, the lies piling up like mold behind wallpaper. But this was different. There was a heaviness in my limbs, a fuzziness in my thoughts. And when I looked in the mirror, even my reflection looked unsure of me. I came downstairs slower than usual. Claire was already in the kitchen, which was odd. She never started her day before 9, and even then only if the toddler cried. But today, she was humming. Coffee was brewing. The table was already set. "Morning, Mary," she said brightly, too brightly. "I made your coffee. Just the way you like it." She held out the mug like it was a peace offering. Like she was proud of herself. I took it. Smiled politely. But something in her eyes, too eager, too expectant, stopped me cold. Call it gut instinct. Call it a nurse's intuition, built over 40 years of catching things other doctors missed. Or maybe it was something deeper, that old, bone-deep awareness women carry when danger's in the room. I didn't drink the coffee. I set it down on the counter slowly. "Oh," I said, "I'm not really in the mood this morning. My stomach's a bit off." Claire's face twitched, just for a second. A flicker of annoyance before she recovered into a forced smile. "Oh, no worries." She took a sip of hers and turned back to the sink, humming again. But I watched her out of the corner of my eye. She never touched her own mug again. Jason came downstairs a few minutes later, phone in hand. He barely looked at me. Claire glanced at him, then at the untouched mug. He nodded. She nodded back. And that's when I knew. I turned away from them and reached for the skillet to start breakfast. Because I always made breakfast. Eggs. Toast. Bacon for the toddler. But the pain came before I could crack the first egg. A sharp, sudden pressure in my chest, like a fist curling inside my ribs. I gasped. My knees buckled. The skillet clattered to the floor. My left arm went numb. My vision blurred. I couldn't breathe. I was having a heart attack. And I knew, immediately, instinctively, this was no coincidence. "Jason," I whispered, reaching toward him. He didn't move. Claire stepped around me, careful not to trip over my hand. "Derek," she called out, loud and cheerful, "it's happening." Jason crouched beside me. For a brief moment, I thought, maybe he'd help. But he just looked at me like a stranger. Like a broken thing. "How long do you think it takes?" he asked Claire. "Internet says 5 to 20 minutes, she replied. "Longer if no one calls for help." They were watching me die. Not panicking. Not shocked. Just, observing. Jason leaned in close. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, and for a second, I believed him. Until he reached out and gently kicked my phone out of reach. Claire walked to the door. Turned the lock. Stepped outside. Jason followed, silent. Then, just before the door closed, Claire leaned in. Her voice was soft. Matter of fact. Goodbye, Mary. Don't worry, we'll take good care of the house. The door clicked shut. I was alone. Paralyzed. Collapsing inside my own body, in the house I had built with love. But I wasn't dead yet. And I wasn't done. Time distorts when you're in pain. Seconds feel like hours. Minutes like years. And when you're lying on the cold tile of your kitchen floor, alone, heart failing, unable to scream, you start to wonder if this is how it ends. Not with peace. Not with closure. But with silence. I could still hear them, Jason and Claire, outside the front door. The scrape of car tires on gravel. The soft thunk of the trunk being closed. Laughter. They were laughing. I tried to call out. Tried to crawl. But my body refused. My mind was screaming, but my voice, gone. My hand reached for the chair leg, dragging my weight inch by inch across the floor. Every heartbeat felt like a punch from the inside. The world pulsed in and out, blurs of light, shadows swimming behind my eyes. I reached for my purse. My phone had slid under the counter. Out of reach. Kicked there by my own son. From outside, I heard Claire's voice. Make the call now, she said, too casually. Jason mumbled something back. Then, I heard it, the unmistakable tone of him dialing. Yeah, this is Jason Thompson. I'm calling to report a death. My mother, Mary, she passed this morning. It was peaceful. I stopped crawling. It was done. They were burying me before I was even gone. I stared at the kitchen ceiling. The same ceiling Charles and I had painted in 1981. The one Jason used to stare at while eating Cheerios in his high chair. And now, he was calling to report me dead. While my heart still beat. While I still remembered the taste of Claire's poisoned coffee on the back of my tongue. While I still had breath, shallow and ragged, but breath all the same. I thought of everything I hadn't done. The book I never finished. The letter to my niece in Atlanta I hadn't mailed. The final stitch in the baby quilt I was making, for Jason's second child, due in December. They would never know me. And worse, they'd only know her. Claire. The woman who'd steal my legacy and smile through the funeral. Then. A sound. Knock knock knock. Faint at first. Then louder. More urgent. Bang. 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 Mary? Mary, are you home? It was a woman's voice. My heart lurched, not from pain, but hope. Mary, I just saw your car in the driveway. Are you okay? It was Mrs. Ramirez. My neighbor. The one who brought me sunflowers on my birthday. The one who'd borrowed my crock-pot for church picnics. The one I trusted with a secret key, just in case. I tried to shout. Nothing came. I clawed at the floor. I could see the back door from here. More banging. I'm coming in, she yelled. I've got your spare key. Then, the sound of the lock turning. A rush of air. Footsteps racing across the floor. Oh my God, Mary. She was at my side in seconds. Dropped to her knees. Phone in hand. 911, she said quickly. She's breathing, but barely, 74-year-old female. Possible heart attack. We need an ambulance now. She grabbed my hand. It was shaking. I'm here. I'm not leaving you, Mary. You're going to be okay. Just stay with me. I couldn't speak. But I squeezed her fingers once. It was all I could do. It was all I had left. But it was enough. As the sirens wailed in the distance, I saw something shift in Mrs. Ramirez's eyes. From panic to fury. She had seen them leave. She had heard the car drive away. She had questions. And I had a witness. I don't remember the moment they lifted me off the kitchen floor. But I remember the lights, red and blue strobing across the kitchen walls, flashing over the coffee Claire made me, still steaming on the counter. I remember Mrs. Ramirez's voice. Firm, focused, stronger than I'd ever heard it. She was alone. They locked the door and left. I saw them. I remember her climbing into the ambulance beside me, refusing to leave my side. Stay with me, Mary, she whispered, holding my hand the entire ride. Just hold on. Help is coming. I wanted to tell her everything. The pills. The fake concern. The whispers of inheritance and nursing homes, but my throat felt like it had been lined with sandpaper, and my chest throbbed like a distant drum. So I closed my eyes. And let her voice guide me back. At the ER, they moved fast. Monitors, IVs, blood tests, EKGs. A masked nurse leaned over me. Ma'am, can you hear me? You're having a heart attack. We're going to take care of you. Mrs. Ramirez was still there. Her name is Mary Thompson. She's 74. And she didn't call 911, I did. Her son and daughter-in-law left her on the floor. The nurse frowned. The paramedics exchanged a look. One of them stepped out of the room, murmuring something into his radio. In surgery, they found a blocked artery. We cleared it just in time, the cardiologist said later. Another 20 minutes, and we would have been having a very different conversation. I wasn't surprised. I knew how close I'd come. Not just to death, but to disappearing. My story told by people who had already started writing the ending. When I woke up in recovery, the room was quiet. Dim. Mrs. Ramirez was asleep in the corner chair, arms crossed, lips pressed into a firm line even in rest. She'd stayed. My throat still burned. My chest was sore. But I was alive. That afternoon, a police officer entered the room. A young man with close-cropped hair and a voice so soft it reminded me of Jason when he was little. Mrs. Thompson, he said, my name's Officer Daniels. I need to ask you a few questions, only if you're feeling up to it. I nodded weakly. He opened a small notebook. We've received a report from a Ms. Ramirez stating you were left alone during a medical emergency. She says your son and daughter-in-law locked the door and drove away. Is that correct? I opened my mouth. No sound. Mrs. Ramirez stood beside me now. She's been through hell, she snapped. You need to see the footage. Daniels paused. Footage? I blinked slowly. Yes. Security footage. The hidden cameras. My hand moved with effort, trembling as I mimed a small rectangle, a phone. Mrs. Ramirez understood instantly. She grabbed my purse from the corner of the room and dug inside. Found my spare phone. Scrolled through the app I'd used to monitor the cameras. She held it out. There, she whispered. Officer Daniels watched. His expression changed with each second of video. He saw me collapse, saw Jason walk in, look down at me, and walk away. Heard Claire say, "It's happening." Saw Jason gently kick my phone under the cabinet. Heard Claire whisper, Goodbye, Mary. He looked up at me slowly. We'll need to make a copy of this. By nightfall, detectives were at the hospital. They'd gone to the house, but Claire and Jason were gone. Took their bags, the baby, the laptop, and, presumably, the lie they'd rehearsed. But what they didn't take: Mrs. Ramirez's eyewitness account, my security camera recordings, and one very specific detail she'd overheard in the garden that morning. Claire had already told someone I was dead. She had been on the phone, confirming it, while I was still fighting for breath. By morning, there was a bolo out, a police bulletin to locate both Claire and Jason. Credit card activity. License plate. Cell tower pings. The officer promised me, "We're going to bring them in, ma'am. And you're going to get justice." I closed my eyes. Not in pain this time. Not in fear. But in clarity. The first shot had been fired. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting back. They caught her the next afternoon. Claire. Jason was with her. They were in a motel just outside Savannah, Georgia, using a debit card linked to one of my old joint accounts, the one I had emptied weeks ago. She was furious when the police knocked. Not scared. Not ashamed. Just inconvenienced. Like her shopping trip had been interrupted. They brought them both back to Charleston. Booked them at the local jail on preliminary charges of elder abuse and attempted fraud. But the real evidence, the part that made the detectives go pale when they watched it, was what came next. The footage from the living room camera, hidden inside the fake air freshener, showed something the kitchen one didn't. After I collapsed, after they walked out, Claire went back inside. She didn't help me. She didn't check if I was still breathing. She walked to my bookshelf, pulled out a worn poetry collection, Frost's collected works. Flipped through it, and pulled out an envelope. My original will. The decoy I'd left in plain sight. She smiled. Took out a lighter. And set it on fire, right there, over the sink. Ashes scattered onto my granite countertop. She didn't know there was another will. She didn't know about the notarized document Robert had secured weeks earlier. Or that I had named my niece Ava as my power of attorney. Claire believed she had erased the last legal obstacle between her and my house. But she wasn't just erasing a document. She was exposing herself. When Detective Williams came to visit me in the hospital 2 days later, he brought more than just updates. He brought a folder. Photos. Printouts. Bank transfers. Phone records. And something else, a background report. "Mary," he said gently, placing the folder in my lap. We looked into Claire. Or rather, Madeline Claire Brower. That's her legal name. The one she changed after a plea deal in 2013. I blinked. She had another name? She was arrested in Florida. Grand larceny. Financial abuse of a senior she had worked for as a home aide. He paused. The case was sealed after a plea bargain. She moved, changed her name, and, we believe, targeted Jason shortly after. My hands trembled as I flipped through the report. There she was. Same eyes. Same smile. Different name. Different town. Different victim. She was playing the long game, Williams said quietly. Married your son. Waited for financial access. Used your house, your trust, as the endgame. Claire had spent years building this. She'd convinced Jason to move in. She'd pushed the narrative of my forgetfulness. She planted doubts. She documented moments. She coached him on what to say. and she almost got away with it. Detective Williams leaned forward. There's one more thing. He pulled out a USB drive. Security footage wasn't the only thing we recovered. Your neighbor, Mrs. Ramirez, she took photos that morning. Of the car. Of Jason and Claire laughing. Of them loading bags. Of Claire on the phone saying, "It's done." He smiled slightly, a look of quiet satisfaction. She also recorded the entire ambulance ride. Your vitals. Her voice stating the timeline. You being conscious. All admissible in court. I wanted to cry. But I didn't. I breathed. A full, clean breath. Because finally, the story wasn't just mine to carry. There were eyes on them now. Eyes that couldn't be tricked by polite smiles or carefully planted lies. As I lay in my hospital bed, I thought of Claire's voice again, that moment by the door. Don't worry, we'll take good care of the house. And I realized, she wasn't just trying to kill me. She was trying to erase me. Piece by piece. Until nothing was left but a story she controlled. But now? Now I had witnesses. Now I had facts. Now I had fire. The house had changed since I left it on a stretcher. It felt heavier, quieter, like it had absorbed everything that happened, and couldn't forget it. 2 detectives accompanied me and Robert back home 2 weeks after my discharge. I had insisted. I needed to see it again. To face it. Jason and Claire were being held without bail, awaiting formal charges. But I wanted to walk through the crime scene of my life while it still belonged to me. I moved slowly, my legs not yet strong, but I made it through the front door without help. The kitchen hit me first, the skillet still dented where it had fallen, the broken coffee mug swept into a plastic bag marked evidence. There was a faint scorch mark on the granite where Claire had burned the decoy will. I traced it with my finger. In the living room, the air freshener camera still sat on the shelf. Robert picked it up and placed it in a brown envelope. Don't need them anymore, he said. But you were smart to have them. I didn't answer. My eyes were locked on the hallway leading upstairs. That's when the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then cut out completely. Everything went black. At first, we thought it was a fuse. Detective Williams pulled out his flashlight, muttering something about an old circuit breaker. But then we heard it. A creak upstairs. And then, a soft, dragging sound. Williams raised his voice. Hello? This is law enforcement. Identify yourself. No answer. I stood frozen. I hadn't authorized anyone to be in the house. Claire and Jason were still in custody. The property was sealed. Or so I thought. Williams gestured for us to stay behind. He and the second officer moved quietly toward the staircase. Flashlights cutting through the dark like blades. Robert stood in front of me, protective, his hand lightly against my arm. Then, a scream. Not from upstairs. From the basement. Williams pivoted instantly, flashlight now pointed toward the cellar door, which hung open by an inch. The officer kicked it wide. Come out now, he shouted. Silence. Then, footsteps. Rapid. Scrambling. Someone ran up from the basement and bolted through the back entrance, but the officers were faster. There was a struggle in the dark. Something crashed, maybe the coat rack, then a grunt, a sharp cry, and finally, the loud clack of handcuffs. Got him, one of them yelled. It wasn't Jason. It was someone else. A man. Mid-30s. Nervous. sweating. He wasn't on any of our lists. Turned out, Claire had a backup plan. She'd mailed a second copy of the forged will to a former boyfriend weeks earlier, along with instructions and a house key. If anything went wrong, he was supposed to come back, destroy the original evidence, and clear the place of anything tying her to a motive. He'd broken in that morning, cut the power, and was rifling through my basement files when we arrived. What he didn't know: I had already handed over everything to the police. There was nothing left to hide, but the fact that he came at all, that Claire had an insurance policy in human form, told me just how far she had planned to go. She was thorough, ruthless, and arrogant enough to think I'd never come home again. After they took him away, I sat in the living room, lights back on, watching the police clear every room. I thought about the timeline. The lies. The masks. The coffee. The door lock. And I realized, Claire had never lost control. She was always in control. Until she wasn't. Until I lived. Until I came back. And now, everything was about to turn, because the last piece hadn't been played yet. I hadn't spoken. And they hadn't heard my voice. But they would. Soon. They had burned the wrong will. It was one of the first things I told Robert after I regained consciousness, barely able to speak but mouthing the words clearly: book of poems, second will. He understood immediately. Claire thought she was clever. She'd found the envelope tucked inside the drawer, the fake will I'd planted with Jason still listed as executor, Claire named as medical proxy. She believed she'd erased the only legal roadblock between her and my estate, but I had outmaneuvered her. The real will was hidden in plain sight, inside Frost's collected poems, a book Claire had once scoffed at as dusty nonsense. I knew she'd never touch it. Robert had the document notarized, double-sealed, and backed up in his office files. But this copy, the original, hand-signed, tucked between pages I had once read aloud to Charles during his last hospital stay, felt like the soul of my defense. We retrieved it together. There, in my living room, with the house still trembling from the break-in and attempted destruction of evidence, Robert opened the book and pulled out the sealed envelope. Inside, my new will, dated 6 weeks prior. A letter revoking Jason's financial rights. A power of attorney granted to Ava, my niece. And a handwritten addendum outlining my decision to donate a portion of the house proceeds to elder abuse prevention programs in South Carolina. This, Robert said, holding it up, is going to bury them. And it did. The district attorney's office had already gathered enough evidence to charge Jason and Claire with attempted murder and financial fraud. But this irrefutable, legally sound, perfectly timed document, proved motive, premeditation, and intent beyond doubt. They weren't just opportunists. They were planners. And the only reason their plan didn't work was because I knew them better than they thought. Back at the hospital, a social worker asked me why I hadn't just thrown them out when I suspected something. Why I waited. I told her the truth. You can't accuse someone of burning your life down when all they've done so far is strike the match. But now? The fire was real. And Claire was going to watch it consume everything she tried to steal. Detective Williams came by that evening with the news. Claire had broken. Finally. During interrogation, when confronted with the footage, the phone records, and the original will, she snapped. Called it all an overreaction. Claimed she was just trying to keep things organized in case something happened, but when they played the footage of her burning the fake will, and smiling while she did it, she had no answers. Jason, on the other hand, hadn't said a word. Not in the holding cell. Not to his lawyer. Not even to Claire. He just sat there. Staring at the wall. It struck me then, I had lost him long before this. Before Claire. Before the lies. Somewhere along the way, my son had stopped being mine. And I had never noticed. But he wasn't the one who would break me. Not now. Because the paper they thought they could burn? That was just parchment. This, the truth, the camera footage, my voice, my memory, this was the fire. And it was just getting started. The courtroom smelled like old wood and fresh paper, a sterile kind of reverence meant to make you believe justice was sacred. But I didn't feel safe. Not yet. Not until I said what needed to be said. They tried to keep me off the witness list at first. Too frail, they said. Too recently hospitalized. Too emotionally vulnerable. But I told the DA's office, if I survived what they did to me, I can survive looking them in the eye. So I testified. In front of the jury, in front of Jason. In front of Claire. And in front of strangers whose faces twisted in shock as they heard what had almost happened to me in my own kitchen, not by strangers, but by my family. I sat upright. No cane. No tears. And I spoke. You thought I was weak? I began, my voice quiet but sharp, I raised a murderer, and I survived it. Claire blinked rapidly, her lips trembling. Jason looked down. Not ashamed. Not guilty. Just absent. That was the most painful part. He wasn't even in the room anymore. Not in the way that mattered. I told the jury about the poisoned coffee, the bank accounts, the mail, the manipulation, and the whisper through the keyhole, the one I would never unhear. Claire's lawyer tried to object. The judge waved him off. I told the truth. And I told it well. But it wasn't just me they needed to hear from. The prosecution called a surprise witness next. Her name was Evelyn Grant. And to most of the courtroom, she was a stranger. But not to me. She was the friendly woman who joined my Bible study group a few months back. The one who asked thoughtful questions. The one who always sat quietly during our post-service coffee hours, watching, listening. Now she walked to the stand in a navy blazer, hair pulled back, notebook in hand. And introduced herself as an undercover investigative journalist, specializing in elder abuse and inheritance exploitation. The courtroom gasped. Even I turned to Robert, eyes wide. She wasn't Evelyn Grant. She was Natalie Mercer, a reporter for the Carolina Chronicle, and she'd been investigating Claire for 6 months. Why? Because Claire had done it before. In Florida. And in Tennessee. In both cases, she had moved in with elderly relatives or employers, fabricated mental health concerns, filed for power of attorney, and then sold off assets under their names. Only one case ever made it to court. The victim died before testifying. Charges were dropped. Natalie, Evelyn, had been tracking her ever since. When Claire married Jason and moved to Charleston, Natalie followed. And when she heard whispers at local estate planning offices about a frail old woman with a valuable house in the historic district, she found her way into my church. Into my life. At first, I felt violated. But then I realized, she may have saved me. Her presence at Bible study. Her questions about Jason. Her polite curiosity, all of it was to protect someone like me. She had recorded Claire on the phone. Had captured her talking about timelines and liquidating assets before I ever collapsed. She submitted her evidence to prosecutors the morning Claire was arrested. She didn't ask for credit. She asked for change. She wanted me to tell my story, publicly. Not just in court. but in front of the world. I said yes. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I didn't look back at Claire. I didn't need to. She wasn't the storm anymore. I was. And storms don't apologize. They clear. The gavel dropped. Not dramatically. Not like in the movies. Just a sharp, final sound. Like a door clicking shut. Guilty. On all counts. Attempted murder. Elder abuse. Financial fraud. Conspiracy to defraud a vulnerable adult. Claire was sentenced to 18 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for at least 12. Jason received 12 years, lighter, but heavy enough to drown a man who'd already stopped swimming. I watched them as they were led away. Claire didn't look back. She knew. She had lost. Jason, he looked once. Just once. But there was no apology in his eyes. Only the haunted glaze of a man who couldn't tell the difference between being used and being guilty. Maybe, deep down, he knew there was no difference. The courtroom cleared slowly. Reporters whispered into their phones. Evelyn, or rather, Natalie, gave one brief comment to the press. She never mentioned my name. Per my request. Robert placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. It's over, he said. But he was wrong, because some things don't end with a gavel. I returned home 3 days later. Not to the Charleston house, that was gone now, on the market through a trusted realtor. Too many shadows. Too many ghosts pressed into the walls. Instead, I moved into a quiet condo just north of Myrtle Beach, near the sea, with a small porch and a lemon tree in the backyard. Mrs. Ramirez lived next door. We had coffee every Sunday. She called it holy hour. I called it breathing. Then, one morning, a letter arrived. Thick envelope. No return address. Inside, a single page. Handwritten. From Jason. I read it 3 times before I could process the words. Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I barely expect you to read this. I just want you to know, Claire started it. But I let it happen. That's on me. There's no excuse for what I did. Not the money. Not the fear. Not the helplessness I felt after I lost my job. I chose cowardice. I chose silence. I chose to follow her instead of stand up to her. That makes me worse than her. I know you survived. And I know you're telling your story now. I hope you keep telling it. Just, maybe don't leave out the part where your son failed you. I deserve to be in here. But I still think about you every day. I miss you. I love you. I'm sorry. Jason. I folded it carefully and set it in the drawer by my bed. Not because I forgave him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But because it was the first honest thing he'd said to me in years. And I wanted to remember how truth felt on paper. That night, I stood by the window, watching the moonlight slide across the lemon tree. Somewhere, miles away, Jason sat behind concrete and steel. Somewhere else, Claire stared at a ceiling that would never again belong to her. And here I was. Alive. Not whole, but healing. The world had moved on. But I hadn't. Not quite. Because grief doesn't leave like a thief. It lingers like perfume, faint, bitter, and always familiar. But justice? Justice burns. And when the ashes settle, you get to decide what grows from the ground. The letter stayed in the drawer for 3 days. I'd open it, glance at the handwriting, run my fingers over the paper. Then I'd close the drawer again. I wasn't ready. But grief has a rhythm. A slow, circling beat that loops through forgiveness, fury, sorrow, confusion, and eventually, understanding. Not peace. Not acceptance. Just understanding. So, on the third night, I poured a cup of chamomile tea, sat on the porch beside my lemon tree, and read Jason's words, one line at a time. Out loud. I don't expect forgiveness. Good. Because I didn't have any to give. Claire started it. But I let it happen. I paused there, heart thudding. Because buried in that line was a hard truth, he knew. He always knew. He had stood over me on the kitchen floor and chose silence. That makes me worse than her. No, I thought. It just makes you mine. My son. And that's what hurt most of all. The last line read, I miss you. I love you. I'm sorry. And I believed him. I did. But belief isn't the same as absolution. It doesn't erase the bruises on your soul. I placed the letter on the table. Took a breath that shook in my chest. And cried, not like the sobs in the hospital, or the angry tears during the trial. This was something else. Softer. Older. The kind of cry that sounds like relief, and mourning, at the same time. I cried for the boy he used to be. The one who brought me daffodils after his first paycheck. Who used to call me during college just to hear my voice. Who once wrote a birthday card that said, to the strongest woman I'll ever know. That boy was gone. And now, all that remained was a man in prison. And a mother on a porch, reading a goodbye letter in the dark. 2 days later, the podcast went live. Natalie, Evelyn, had interviewed me privately, gently. No pressure. Just space. She called the episode The Locked Door. It opened with my voice. Real. Unscripted. My name is Mary Thompson. I'm 74 years old. I was almost murdered in my own kitchen by the people I once called family. Then came the story. All of it, from the milk carton lie to the fake coffee to the final click of the front door lock. By morning, the episode had 10,000 downloads. By afternoon, it had 100,000. People started writing in. Sons. Daughters. Grandchildren. Nurses. Strangers. Sharing stories. Offering support. Saying thank you. I didn't expect it. I didn't ask for it. But it felt like justice had echoed, louder than I ever could have shouted alone. The day after the podcast went viral, a white envelope arrived. No name. No stamp. Just dropped off at the front desk of my condo. Inside, a single sheet of paper, you may have one, but you'll always be alone. No signature. But I knew. It was Claire. Even behind bars, she couldn't resist one last flick of poison. I folded the note carefully. Lit a match. And watched it burn over the sink. She was wrong. Because I wasn't alone. Not anymore. The microphone was small. Simple. Black. Natalie clipped it to my sweater and adjusted the levels on her recorder. We sat in her makeshift studio, really just a spare room in her Myrtle Beach condo. With egg crate foam on the walls and tea cooling in mismatched mugs. Just speak naturally, she said. No pressure, no edits unless you ask. Tell it like you lived it. I nodded. Took a breath. And hit record. My name is Mary Thompson. I am a mother. A widow. A survivor of attempted murder. I was betrayed by my son. I was nearly erased by my daughter-in-law. And I lived to tell the story they tried to bury. The words came slowly at first. Then in waves. Not rehearsed. Not dramatic. Just truth. Measured. Raw. Free. I told listeners about the signs. The manipulation. The silence that grew like rot under the foundation of my home. I told them about the door locking behind Claire's back, about the voice through the keyhole. About the cold tile beneath my cheek as the poison worked its way through me. And then, I told them about survival. About Mrs. Ramirez. About the cameras. About justice. About choosing to live when it would have been easier to disappear. The episode aired a week later. Not on a major network. Just on a podcast feed with a modest following and a powerful mission. By the end of the first day, over 250,000 people had heard my voice. By the end of the week, a senator's office had reached out, asking for a meeting. By the end of the month, the Mary Foundation had its first donors. Natalie helped me set it up. We provide grants to seniors at risk of elder abuse, small security systems, legal consultations, anonymous reporting channels. We speak at retirement communities. We train bank tellers and postal workers how to recognize financial manipulation. It's not glamorous work. But it's honest. And it's mine. On Tuesday afternoons, I teach a memoir writing class at the community center. On Thursdays, I play cards with Mrs. Ramirez and her sister who just moved in. On Sundays, I sit in church with a notebook in my lap, not for God, exactly. But for peace. The kind you earn. The kind no one can steal. Sometimes, I still dream about the kitchen. Not the betrayal. But before that. The warmth of Charles's hand on my back. The smell of fresh lemon bars cooling on the counter. Jason giggling as he tried to make pancakes without help. Home. That's what they tried to take. But they didn't. Because home isn't wood and drywall. It's memory. It's voice. And mine was never for sale. A month ago, a moving truck pulled into the unit across from mine, a new neighbor. Young woman. Mid-30s. Quiet. Kind eyes. She introduced herself. Hi, she said, smiling. I'm Lucy. I'm Claire's sister. Time froze. Just for a second. Then I extended my hand. Firm. Steady. Well, I said. Let me tell you a story.